disruptive.
America that I fought for.
Weird thing to happen. Hello, one and all. Welcome to this edition of Kitz Corner. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. And let's jump gears to jolly old England because, well, their news service, the BBC, has just announced it's going to counter disinformation. As opposed to actually, having insight and investigations and holding people accountable, they're going to take their energy and their resources and their value to countering randos on the internet that are speaking out of their ass. Because that is where journalism has gotten to. Instead of holding the corrupted accountable and informing us about that, which has led down to us, that's why we're now the watchdogs. We're the ones that have to, hold things accountable because corporate journalism is just such a flaw right now. And continuing to be that it just comes down to people like me, late 20-something-year-old on a shoestring budget podcast doing it in his basement. It's just unbelievably insane. But here we go. BBC Verify is about to launch to counter disinformation. That is the service that BBC, which is a state-sponsored television service, it's state owned and operates. The BBC, it's the British Broadcasting Corporation, launching a service to counter disinformation, and it's not what it sounds like it is. It sounds more on the factor that it's just, again, a corporate news stooge is going to attack randos on the internet to spread their disinformation. So it goes on, this is from The National, and it goes on by saying the BBC has launched a new investigative journalism team tasked with countering disinformation and fact-checking. BBC Verify will continue to broadcast an online report, and the team will include analysis editor Ross Askins and disinformation correspondent Mariana Spring. Introducing the brand new on BBC Breakfast on Monday, Spring said the point of the team is to verify video, to fact check, to counter disinformation, and to analyze really complex stories so we can get to the truth of what's going on. The point is, that's what they should be doing, but they haven't done that in years, which is why it comes down to people like me and why I encourage more people to be skeptical of what you're seeing on the news, because even trusted journalists out there are going to get things wrong. And how we grow as people is that we become skeptical. We become our own journalists. And the best way to find out real information is to do a little searching yourself. But they don't want that. They don't want actual fact checking. They don't want people to discredit, propaganda and actually focus on the real truth and investigate. They don't want any of that. They just want people to repeat what the BBC is saying, and they're going to counteract the people that are going against the BBC, going against the establishment in the UK. Its first investigation was released on Monday to coincide with the unveiling of the new team and use satellite images to identify the locations of Russia fortifications in Ukraine. So that's their first subject matter, is to counteract people that are bringing the whole story about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. People like me who have been telling people and letting people know that there's an entire history building up to this conflict. It wasn't that Russia came in on a snowy night and decided to obliterate Ukraine. It's been going on for years. It's a manufactured war. And people don't realize that because they're not being told the whole truth. They're not being told on the BBC. They're not being told on the CBC here. They're not being told in the US media. They're not being told in any other media. That's why they have to go to outsiders. That's why they have to go to randos on the internet to remind them a bit of history and the fact that in 2014, we overthrew the Democratic elected government in Ukraine to install a puppeteer government that was going to enforce neo-Nazism and go and counteract against Russia. And also how NATO broke peace promises, how they broke the Minsk Accord, how they expanded into Russian territory even though they said they weren't, and how military contractors were advancing, how the United States has perpetrated basically a virtual war against Russia for all these years with Russiagate and the disinformation campaign that they were promoting. But that's their first investigation to tackle randos on the internet and give you the real insight about Russia and Ukraine. So here's the tweet here. This is from the BBC Breakfast. And they say, has unveiled BBC Verify to address the growing threat of disinformation and build trust with audience through transparency. I wonder if that also means that through transparency, are they going to reveal how much Pfizer money they're getting in advertising? Are they going to reveal what those advertising dollars really go towards? Because it's not just advertising. You know, they're not buying the media just to buy at the media. They're doing it to promote something. They're doing it to promote an agenda. That's what advertisers are doing when it comes to corporate media. It's not just to advertise 747 on mainstream networks, because anyone that's watching it at home, they're not going to care about a 747, but they're going to buy airtime to then squander the journalists and promote the corporate agenda that was bought out by the corporation. I wonder if they're going to reveal that transparency. Probably not. The BBC's disinformation correspondent, Mariana Spring, had more details on this. So let's take a look at this video and judge for ourselves just how this Verify is going to work.
Welcome to BBC Verify. Like you said, we are a team of investigative journalists here at the BBC. We are also a new brand, and we are a physical location above the newsroom in London. And the point of the team, as you said, is to verify video, to fact check, to counter disinformation, and to analyse really complex stories so we can get to the truth of what's going on. Why does this matter? Well, mistruths can cause really serious harm to society and to the people in them. And so
Is anyone else concerned about how she said mistruths? So instead of saying disinformation, instead of actually saying that, she's saying mistruths. Like, I'm scratching my head thinking that even is a word. Mistruths. We're going to counteract mistruths. What the hell does that even mean? What are mistruths? It sounds like you're saying part of the truth, but then something, caved off and it's half truth but half wrong. Like, I don't know what that means. You're going to verify and tackle down on mistruths. That is what that's the energy that the BBC is putting together. All their resources, all their journalism, all of it collaborating together to then go on the internet and verify different posts. Like, it's just, anyway, there's more of this.
We want to show you our workings and really help you understand how we get to the bottom of what's happening. And I'm going to give you a bit of a flavour of the kind of work that the team are doing. So we're able to look at maps to geolocate specific situations, stuff that's going on. This is just a map of central London where we are now. And this is New Broadcasting House, where I'm speaking to you from. And it's not so important perhaps for the centre of London, but it is when we're analysing war zones or what's happening in hard to reach places. And there's a story.
So their claim to fame is that they're bringing up Google Maps. This is hilarious. This is hilarious. All the money and the resources that they're pulling together, and then they bring up Google Maps and go, look, we could show you where we're broadcasting from. Isn't that cool? Mom, Dad, look at this. That's where I am right now. Look, I'm drawing a circle. I'm verifying that I'm actually in this building. And these are people that make, I don't know how much they get paid in the UK, but these are people that make upward, you know, you take Rachel Maddow, you take, you know, Sean Hannity, you take those, you know, primetime journalists that are, you know, giving you the straight dope. They can make upwards to $30,000 per night. And this is the best expertise you can get. Look, I brought up Google Maps on a screen, and I'm circling it so I know I'm broadcasting from this area. First off, way to dox yourself. That's a good start to, you know, handling the mistruths, is doxing yourself and prove, yeah, I'm exactly in this building. I can tell you exactly what floor and what I had for lunch today to tell you exactly that I'm not lying. Oh my God, this is hilarious. There's more.
Story on the BBC website today. It's looking at Russian fortifications on the front lines in Ukraine, and you can read more about it there. And there are other ways that we also are able to interrogate what's going on, including on social media.
Can we also read about the verified neo-Nazis that we partaked and we built up to basically initiate the attack against Russia, the attack against the Donbass region? Why don't you tell people about the Donbass region and the people of Crimea that are primarily more Russian than they are Ukrainian? How about you express that and verify that? You know, the people that are actually heading towards and want to be defended by Russia, and why Russia came in was to defend the Donbass region, because the Donbass region has embarked in a civil war against the rest of Ukraine for the longest time. How about you verify that? How about you verify the history of Ukraine? How all this started? Instead of just showing Google Maps and say, look, there's troops there, and there, and there, and there. Why don't you tell people exactly how this war started? They won't tell you that, because then you realize it was manufactured mostly by us, by the United States, by NATO, by the UK. They're the biggest pushers of these wars, and they're continuing to push. And that's why they have these verified now at the BBC. State affiliate propaganda now verifying that propaganda.
I have some undercover accounts that I've set up for the BBC's Americast podcast, and we use these kinds of undercover accounts, and these are the characters that the accounts belong to be able to really understand polarization online and how what's happening on our social media feeds and what we're being recommended and pushed to us can affect all of us. And they don't offer us a totally...
So we got Google Maps. We know where troops are. And now you're catfishing people. Good work. Good, awesome work. We're going to catfish people and then undermine the people that are actually telling the truth and actually verifying with actual data and analysis and evidence to back those claims. We're going to undermine that completely because I made a bunch of accounts posing as different Americans. Like you saw it. It was the most stereotypical accounts you can imagine. One was, you know, populist right from Houston, Texas. And then there was another one from, you know, liberal leftists of Oregon. Like, people can probably see through that. You know, catfishing is very common, and people are aware about that. And there's, you know, there's actually programs that are designed. There's videos out there that are, you know, that are warning people about catfishing and what are the telltale signs. You can easily tell that those are fake accounts. You can easily kind of tell.
Exhaustive insight into what's going on, but they can help us understand just how social media works. And then there's also investigating other mistruths and the real world harm they can cause. At the moment, I'm investigating the UK's conspiracy theory movement. I'm trying to understand more about how it's evolved and intensified since the pandemic here in the UK. I'm looking at the alternative media that finds itself at the heart of this movement, and a conspiracy theory newspaper that's part of that as well. I'm looking at the way that alternative media is funded.
Oh my God. Oh my God, now she's turning to Glenn Beck. Let's get the chalkboard out. Okay, I'm going to have this word, and this word, and this word, and this word, and this is how they're all connected. Because some person on YouTube is telling people things, and then those people are watching it, and then they're thinking about those things, and maybe they're true, so maybe they're going to read for themselves and figure out if that's correct, and maybe they are correct. I don't know, but I'm just going to draw on this board. Oh my God. Oh my God. And you know what the saddest part about this? The saddest part about this is I could honestly see our CBC looking into this. I could honestly see other, across the in this hemisphere. I could see them looking at this and going, maybe we should take that direction because there's a lot of mistruths in Canada. There's a lot of alternative media and conspiracies. As if, corporate media doesn't already promote enough conspiracies. Russia hacked the US democracy through memes. How is that not a conspiracy? It's just unbelievably insane. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. How is that not a conspiracy?
I'm looking at its impact on local communities. I'm looking at its connections with far-right figures and also its foreign links. That's for a podcast series that will be coming out in June. It's called Mariana in Conspiracy Land, and it will be available on BBC Sounds, Radio 4, asking that question, could January the 6th or a German coup attempt like we saw there ever happen here in the UK? So there's a real range of journalism BBC Verify will be doing, and you'll be able to see it online, on iPlayer, across BBC News, on your televisions and radio, so do look out for it.
Yeah, because I'm already so pumped about it on TV that I'm definitely going to listen to a podcast you're also producing on this.
Welcome to BBC Verify.
God. Why? It's also hilarious that her podcast photo, I don't know if you saw there, is basically her looking down a rabbit hole. And I bet you at the end of that rabbit hole is her paycheck, right? That's why she's looking in. Mariana Conspiracy Land. She's looking down to see where the most funding is going to go towards. Which conspiracy should I look into to, get the most money? Oh, this is just, it's so, oh my God. I can feel my brain melting the more I hear about this. Like, this is the opposite of what journalists, like, if Walter Cronkite or any of those people, back in the heyday when they idolized, or Edward R. Murrow, the people that they idolize as, true journalists, that kind of persona, if they saw what was happening to the industry, they'd be puking in their graves right now to realize how ridiculous this all is. Instead of actually holding the people accountable that are promoting the most disinformation, the most mistruths, and actually cultivating their own conspiracies to hide their own criminality, instead of doing that, you're going to go and search a bunch of randos on the internet and confiscate them, and then say and do a victory lap around them on television and the radio and also in their podcast. Because we never report any misinformation or mistruths, except for COVID, Ukraine, January 6th, she just brought up there. And also, just to highlight, I still remember this. So I was old enough to remember when I think I saw this originally on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart when it was actually good. I remember when they mistold people that one of the towers in New York City has already fallen, but it didn't. And that was kind of controversial because it revealed that the BBC was not actually accurate and people had concerns. So remember this.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. It seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jay.
So they're talking about World Trade Center 7. And that was the controversial building that miraculously collapsed on its own. And we were told to believe that it was jet fuel. But if you look at physics, you look at the science, you look at architecture, you look at, all the different findings, the individual investigations on it, it seemed unlikely. It's impossible that a building could just collapse because of jet fuel from a building that was farther away. It just seemed, again, it was the most controversial thing. It's still controversial because nobody knows exactly what happened, because the news media is not holding these people accountable, not actually investigating on the situation. They're just repeating talking points from the feds, from the police and the investigators and the corrupted individuals. They're not really holding people accountable, so they're just going to repeat random talking points like she does here. So watch this.
Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. The details are very, very sketchy. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened.
So, could maybe the first episode of the podcast be an investigation on the fact that one of your correspondents just told their audience that a building collapsed without actually collapsing? Is that a conspiracy? Is that the mistruths that you want to get into? Or do you just want to pick a fight with, Krabby Joe from Michigan, who's just stating whatever he feels? Like, are you actually going to get into real information, or are you just going to try and pick fights with randos? That's the BBC for you. That's the BBC for you. That's the direction of what corporate journalism is getting towards. It's no longer actually viable information that people could witness and actually use an actual critical analysis. It's now just picking fight with randos on Twitter. That's what it's turning out to be. And then verifying the propaganda that they're spewing. Just an absolute absurdity. If Walter Cronkite or Edward R. Murrow or, I don't know, whoever back in the day could see what their industry has become, they would be absolutely spinning in their graves. Just the absurdity of all this.